Hello everyone, and welcome back to my videos, the series Most Beautiful Banknotes. This will be episode number 5, and today we have not really an unattainable banknote, but something a bit different from Russia and one of my favorite banknotes from Imperial Russia. That's the 500 ruble from 1912 1917. And in order to put this one in context, we need to look at the Russian Empire. So, the size of Russia is still today gigantic. It's the the biggest country on earth in terms of size, of terms of area. Um, but during between the 16th and the 20th century, there was a time when Russia achieved his highest amount of land possible for a country since ever. Uh, You can argue that the Spanish Empire was maybe even bigger with the whole South America or most of South America, but that it's another discussion because that was an overseas territory. So Russia, as you can see here, embarked at a certain point in time, had the whole Caucasus region. It had half of what is now China. It had a part of Turkey. It included, well, also still during the Soviet times, but it included a lot of the Baltic states, Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, and even parts of Poland. So it was really one of the biggest empires, or actually the biggest empire ever. And this was during the Tsar's time. Overall, in the highest point, Russian Empire was around the one sixth of the planet Earth, encompassing different civilizations, different religions, and very far away provinces. Most of all, it was interesting that the whole Russian Empire was managed out of Moscow and St. Petersburg, which are in European Russia here in this area. So St. Petersburg is here, and Moscow is around here. So it's quite an astonishing feat. The banknotes that we're talking about was going to be were going to be issued at the beginning of the 20th century, and at the time the Romanovs were in power, ruling the country as czars for 300 years now, and basically Russia was a country without middle class. Um, Nikolai, that you see here, the czar at the time, and his wife. Uh, were considered by many to be just an opulent old um, type of monarchy that was even more complicated at the time because they had been involving religious figures as Rasputin that you see here. I won't go too much into the detail on that, and also Russia, which was more or less always at war with someone, was embarking in the First World War, which they were forced to, together on the side of the Allies, which they end up withdrawing in 1917. So it's in this context at the beginning of the 20th century Russia, with a lot of things happening in the world at the time, that the banknotes of 1905 and 1917 are issued. So they issued, and not all at the same time, but they issued six banknotes. Uh, for me, probably those were the most beautiful banknotes issued at the beginning of the century. They were very colorful. The backs showed or displayed in a few cases, in three, at least in three of the banknotes, old czars, important figures of the Russian Empire in the past. And like I said, they were very colorful, and they had the 3, 5, 10, 25, the fifth, the 100, and the 500 rubles. So the 500 rubles, it's for me the most beautiful of these banknotes, and not so much for the front, which is of course beautiful and colorful as the other ones, but especially the back. But we'll go to that a bit later. So the front, as you can see, clearly has here the symbols of the the Romanov family, and also of the Russian Empire coat of arms. Um, and here on the left side, you have the watermark, which is Peter the Great. And we'll go to that in a bit because Peter the Great was also it's also in the back of the banknote in a more um, visually stunning picture. But here, imagine the watermark here is very beautiful. Also, the detail, the 500 all time and 500 rubles prior to high inflation that happened in the late 1917, 1918, 1919. 500 rubles was a serious amount of money. This was more than most people earn in a couple of months in Russia. So the back, like I said, it's an extraordinary banknote in the back. Here you have Peter the Great, and Peter the Great, for those that don't know, reigned for around 40 years, although effectively he only reigned for around 30 because he was when he was imposed as Czar or Tsar, he was still 10-year old child. So for the first 10 years, actually the first 8 years of his reign, he was or someone was reigning in his place. He comes to a particular time in Russia between the 17th and the 18th century, and he, although extremely controversial still in Russia today, uh, he was the person that basically modernized Russian society and Russian monarchy at that time. He traveled extensively through Europe and brought many different inventions and institutions from Western Europe. Um, he was also very successful in different wars that he fought for the country or for the empire at the time, and he conquered or established the city of St. Petersburg with the first entrance in the Baltic Sea by the Russians. On the same side, and this is why he is also a controversial figure, he committed barbaric acts. A good example is that he ordered the torture and killing of his own son. So I won't go too much into this detail of this story because it's hard to judge historical figures based on the assumptions that we have today of the values that we have today. So that's something that I would leave to people that really study history. In terms of value, and although this banknote is not hard to find, and you just a quick search on eBay and you'll find a lot of these banknotes, in reality is that the values that are given by the world paper money or by the crowds are slightly erroneous. And putting it this way, the 14A, it's basically impossible to find it uncirculated. It's not so hard to find it almost uncirculated, and you can get it for $45 around that. But in reality, really uncirculated condition, I have never seen it. The same can be said about the specimen, which, although put here at $400, I haven't been able to see a single one of these banknotes being sold recently or in the last 5-6 years. The one that is more or less on par between the real market value and the world paper money standard book is the 14B, which, although not so easy to find, there are very few examples, or there's not so many examples. You can probably get it at 40 US dollars with some patience and with some research at $40, and that's the one that I would go for. You also here see the price in very fine, and very fine. You can easily find both variations of this banknote. The specimen, and talking about that, is nothing extraordinary. It just has, as you can see here, specimen pinned in the banknote. But something that is actually very interesting is that this banknote was reissued in 1919, 1920, but with another pinned letter here, and this was issued by the short-lived provisional government of the north part of Russia, or North Russia, the Tchaikovsky government. I wouldn't go too much into the detail of this of North Russia as a small and short-lived issuing currency or issuing entity, but the reality is that after during the Russian Civil War, a lot of different regions of Russia became separatist or were controlled by one faction and the other. This was also the case of North Russia, which encompasses the whole Baltic and the whole European side, well, European and also some part of the Asian side of the North Russia territory. They issued some currency, and due to the lack of they issued actually a few editions, but due to the lack of other banknotes, they decided to also overprint. In this case, with pinned words, old Russian Empire currency, and that's the one that you have here. It's big S 179 in the standard catalog of world paper money. Well, the issue that we talked about is actually the last one under the Tsar rules, the Tsar ruling, or the Imperial Russia. What happened was that in 1917, um, world war, civil war in Russia started, a civil war that would last until 2000, until 1923, and during those times, the Romanov family was eventually killed by Bolsheviks after being imprisoned for some months. Then a lot of, like I mentioned in the past, a lot of secession republics, Transcaucasus, for example, started issuing currency. Some of them fell under Bolshevik rule, some of them fall under White Russian rule. In the end, as you probably know, the Bolsheviks won, and in 1922, all the republics were put back together into the Soviet Union, which would last until 1991 with interesting consequences, I would say. Um, Here's an example of one of the many banknotes issued during the Civil War time for different republics of Russia. I hope that you like this video. Next one will probably just come after New Year's Eve. I wish everyone a happy 2021. Thank you very much for watching.